What's it like not only being part of a business, but integral part of a business as a number two, starting from a 10 million turnover to a 70 million pound turnover business? Well, Rachel Steed is the CFO of Janus International, and they have done exactly that with still aggressive growth plans. So I couldn't wait to have her on the show, and it did not disappoint. We just talk about everything in this episode. We talk about the importance of finance. We talk about the collaboration that is needed between the operations and finance department. We talk about the KPIs you should look for when growing a business, the pitfalls that companies trying to grow or trying to get to A to B and potentially don't look at. We talk about culture and how that changes as you become a large business and how potentially you're going to work with your staff to make sure that you can do that. And it's just a really good open conversation from someone, an aspiring female leader who has got where she is today through hard work and tenacity. And for me, that was an overriding message of today, that you've absolutely get out what you put into this life. So you're going to really enjoy this episode. Please make sure you subscribe and follow. Just click that button because it means the world to me. Hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. So Rachel, welcome on to the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast. Really, can't wait to interview you and have you on here. So how are you? All good?
Yeah, good to be here, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
Would you mind giving listeners and viewers a very quick introduction of yourself and the business, if that was all right?
Sure. So Rachel Steed, I'm the CFO of Janus International Europe Limited. So in our group, we are very international. We've got a US parent company, and the areas that I oversee financially are the UK, Europe, Australia, and Asia. So that's under my remit for finance, IT, and ESG, which is obviously a bit of a watchword right now. So Janus, what does Janus do? We're a $1 billion company headquartered in the US, and we do design, manufacture, and installation of predominantly self-storage solutions, but we do commercial doors internationally as well. So we do have some adjacencies, and we have an digital access control platform as well. So Intertech too.
Excellent. Love it. Perfect. Right. First question, same question I ask everyone. What does it mean to you to be a leader?
I think somebody gave a definition actually, which I thought was a very simple one about being a leader. It's like a manager is somebody who directs people to do stuff, whereas a leader is somebody that hopefully inspires people. And you can tell if you're being effective if you look over your shoulder who's still following. So a manager would instruct you to, whereas a leader will hopefully look over their shoulder and see people in the rearview mirror. So I think I like that definition actually, and I think that's a lot about I think just remaining relevant in what you do and what you say, because if you're not going to, if you are doing that kind of piece, you really do want it to be credible, and that people can see what it is and they follow it because they think it's valuable. So for me, I like the broad collaboration of being a leader. It's great that I get into influencing a lot of decisions. I get that sort of spectrum, so that's really useful. Nobody wants to do just one thing day in, day out, so it's a very broad church, especially in my role. And I think just influencing others actually, so hoping that I do influence others in what I do and how I lead. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, like it. And I like what you said about making sure you're always credible as well, because I guess management is just changing all the time, isn't it? As people change. I think that's the big thing. That's the side to it. Is that something do you feel that almost pressure and responsibility to make sure you're, I guess, continue to hone your skills on that side?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think sometimes old-fashioned finance, obviously in my career, finance has been that. I am an accountant, a qualified accountant. So I think sometimes old finance used to be finance is where numbers go to die and they all go into the corner, and that's where that information ends up. And for me, it's very much making finance in particular relevant for the business to help it make decisions. So there needs to be a kind of complete continuum of that information back out to the organisation so that they can see some of the results that maybe they don't notice day to day. Actually, you can see the trends. If you chart the trends, you can share the trends, and you can just help others in the organisation sort of see the effect of that actually. So being relevant, being credible, we've just come back from a strategy meeting in Singapore for our organisation, thinking about the next 5 years. And whilst you need to have that blue sky thinking, you really do need to bring that back down through the tactical path down to day-to-day activities, actually, because if it's not credible, people can't see it and believe it, then they're not going to reach that goal. So you've really just got to kind of translate that big picture into stuff that people can kind of isolate and digest, basically.
I completely agree. And I really agree with what you said about the finance side to it, because I think a lot of companies make the mistake early doors of not seeing the importance of the financing. It comes back to, cash is king, because a lot of people start businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs start businesses because they're passionate about something or they're good at something. The finance side sometimes is seen wrongly in my eyes as a bit of an add-on, but you learn the hard way typically. Have you seen that as you've worked with various businesses? You've almost had to persuade them for the importance of the finance side?
I think so. Finance is a great way to kind of introduce yourself to the organisation, because ultimately it's something that has to happen. There is a cycle. You move for the numbers don't move for you, the dates don't move for you. You have to do things in a certain time. So it really lends itself very well to business partnering with the organisation, and just getting in deep. So, I mean, we have an operations department where we have project managers who actually sort of deliver on the projects that the sales team sell. So when it comes to revenue recognition and progress on site, you have to know what that is. So you can't just sit in the corner and look at the spreadsheet to see what you think it is. You've got to chat to people. You've got to challenge what they're doing. You've got to kind of keep focus on the commerciality of something. So I very much want to be relevant within the organisation, and I encourage my team to be the same. So yeah, I think, as I said, it's just moving away from that old-fashioned finance. And really, whereas people perhaps called it the accounts department, well, we're not the accounts department, we're the finance department, and we like to be relevant to the organisation. And really, we want people to rely on us. It is that whole cycle of what they need from you and what you can give to them. So, yeah, that's really it. Really,
is technology helping that? Because I guess years gone by, it was Excel spreadsheets, which is still a massive part of business, obviously, but. For a lot of people are turned off by spreadsheets, and they don't really, they just switch off completely. Are you seeing technology almost help because it's easier now to show data to the team in a bit more of a visual method?
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of the challenges in finance is obviously just not taking so long to actually prepare the result or the piece that you're trying to demonstrate. You don't want to spend sort of 3 weeks doing that and then just having like 2 or 3 days rushing about, with the outcomes of it. So if you can streamline the vehicle to get you to that information and then take longer to share and discuss that information, then that has to be better. So technology, I mean, we have a platform. Most of our platforms within our business are Microsoft. So we use a platform that is universal across the entities that I mentioned. So internationally, we can do that. So click of a button, you can see a stock take in another country, in another company. So it definitely helps with that piece. And then you just have those reporting pieces that layer on top, like Power BI and what have you, just that really collates all of that information in sort of data warehouse kind of shape. But it really is just trying to gather information, present information, ask stakeholders what they want to see as well. So you might just go, I think these 5 KPIs, and they'll go, well, actually, that misses what is valuable to us. But yes, definitely tech is a big part of what it needs to be and become more so. I think we're hearing Copilot from Microsoft. So things like that, they're just going to enhance the whole experience, really.
And that got me thinking. So if you were, pick your brains here, if you were to suddenly work for another manufacturer, you wouldn't do, but let's say hypothetically, or if someone did, and they weren't particularly historically au fait with the financial side or even the data side, you mentioned KPIs there. Which do you think would be the most important numbers and pieces of data to look at and to regularly check to get a business back moving in the right direction, would you say? Perhaps for a company that doesn't feel they're doing that right now, that as much as do.
Well, I guess there's the obvious ones. There's your top line revenue. So what are they year on year? What are they against the budget that you set for yourself? So it's really just the metrics in comparison to what you thought you would do. And obviously, it's very good to compare against prior year just to see, are you growing? You can't help but ignore gross margins. So once you've taken off the costs to deliver the projects that you're working on, you need to see what those margins are. And they might be individually by product line as well. So you might go, well, we deliver projects that are self-storage, but within that, we have the manufacture piece, we have the project management delivery piece, we have the freighting piece, et cetera, and more besides. So you need to look at all of those really. And so gross margin is a big thing. You said earlier, cash is king. You can't ignore, you could have a paper profit, which is great, but if you're not collecting your cash, then that will put you into difficulties with suppliers, make relationships tense and things like that. So it's that piece. And then, of course, again, looking at your operational expenditure as a percentage of revenue, you don't want the kind of people that would be considered overhead, of which I would be one. So not kind of like client-facing, it's those other costs. You want to just make sure that they're in context to what your top line is. And there's each company or each industry will have some kind of a metric to compare to, make sure you're not spending too much on your overheads. And then obviously the shareholder return, what you give back to those that have let you be in business in the beginnings, really. So just to make sure that you've got return. So there's a few in there, but then there'll be very specific ones. So as a manufacturer, we'll be looking at the quantity of units we produce. Again, always in comparison. Sometimes that's a tricky one because, if people want to buy different things from you, year on year, you might go, well, that number's gone up, but that number's gone down. But you may be busier. It's just that there's a different mix of what people are seeking. So you just know, and that's why if you perhaps just measure a single KPI, like we have made X units, it may not tell all the story. So you always need those sort of sub-classifications beneath it just to really paint the picture, really.
Love that. Have you seen any common mistakes, would you say, that the manufacturers or even any companies that matter have made, when in terms of when you're looking at the data going, there's low-hanging fruit here. Do you know what I mean? What are the biggest mistakes you see people making in that regard?
Mistakes in what? In measuring KPIs or in the business?
Yeah, I guess if you were to consult the business and lift the bonnet up, are there any obvious things you go, right, you're not looking at this? You're not looking at that. This hasn't been a priority and it should be. Do you know what I mean? Have you seen that in the businesses you work with?
I think you've got to just define what good should look like. So, I mean, I've worked in different industries, business process outsourcing, et cetera. And again, every company has a widget that they sell, be it a service or be it a product. So, particularly for manufacturing, I think we could record units that we make, but we don't know whether that's good. So we would want to judge our capacity. And we would also want to perhaps do some that time management piece of how long it should take to make that piece. Because if you make, say, 100 units a day, you might go, well, we made 100 units before, and that's great because we're adhering to what we're used to. But actually, if you've got the capacity to make 120, well, then 100 isn't really good enough. So it's really just breaking it down. You very often got to kind of deconstruct to reconstruct when you're thinking about things like that. And that would be a really good way to collaborate finance with the production department, just to sort of have them see, how that stacks up, really, to help them understand their own targets, really. Because if you're on the factory floor, you might be turning the handles, getting 100 units out. But if you can strive for 120, it would probably feel very satisfying to hit that.
Yeah, great. And it's a great example. I'm really keen, I'm sure people listening will be as well, to understand briefly a little bit about your journey, because you're CFO of a huge business, number 2, I guess, in terms of structurally. And you've worked your way up in probably a slightly different route than some typically. Can you talk us for a little bit about that? I mean, but did you ever aspire? Do you think you would be in this position? Was this planned meticulously, or is it by chance?
I'd like to say it was, but no, it wasn't. Actually, my dad was an accountant, and that probably made me think that I didn't want to be one. So I spent a long time not doing that. I didn't actually complete my A levels as well. So I did my O levels. I didn't finish my A levels. And I guess that kind of knocked my confidence back a bit. And I took a bit of a different turn. I worked in hospitality, worked in factories, been on the factory production line. Worked, as I said, in hospitality, did some traveling, and then I worked in a different administration role. And actually, in actual fact, when I was in that role, I was sort of going up. I was getting some kind of recognition for what I was doing, but I went for a job that I competed with somebody, a friend of mine, actually, a friend and colleague of mine, who had the qualification and I didn't. And whilst I felt I was very capable of doing the job, I didn't get the job because I didn't have the qualification. So that was like that was a hard knock for me. And it really made me feel very inspired and very motivated to not let that be the reason that I didn't get another chance. So it really kind of just kicked me into thinking, right, well, I need to do that. So I did evening classes for AAT. And then from AAT, I then took on the professional qualification, and I did that evenings and weekends, quite intense. But I felt really, really proud that when I got that qualification, and then I was stepping into finance, because I was in finance whilst I started that journey. And then inevitably, obviously, it was very relevant to be in finance, so I was in finance, and moved across. So I felt that was I really enjoyed it as well. So it really helped me get back on, because a lot of my friends and colleagues had done the university route, but that's not the route I took. But it just goes to show, if you apply yourself to it, then you can put yourself into a space. And then I think, so for me, it's just about, like I said, being credible and relevant. So I've had the opportunities through my career, and I think people have seen me as a solid contributor. So I've been very grateful for the chances that I've had that have led me to here. And I love doing what I do. I don't get bored ever. I think if you've got a sort of curiosity mindset, you follow little things here and there. And everything that you do and learn obviously is valuable to the organisation. So if you can help the organisation in any way, I mean, some of the things that I've done have got really nothing to do with finance. So, for instance, when we finish a project, we used to just go, well, we finished that project, and naturally we would move on to service the next customer and do their project. And then quite often we'd leave that project hanging. So it'd be like, well, okay, well, have we done all the final bits on that? Have we charged the final invoice? Have we paid the subcontractor? Have we done those things? So bringing in just a sort of simple, practical date of completion process, which is very operational and tells the customer that we've finished on site. This is the end of what we're doing for you. And that has been really helpful in terms of our organisation's processes, and helps us. So it's not really to do with finance particularly. Some of it, yes, of course, the invoicing bit, as I said. But it's really satisfying to be able to contribute in that kind of way, actually. And I think maybe when you've done a few things and worked a little bit differently, you kind of get that leveled approach to things, as opposed to, I'm a classic, I've just had the university route and I'm very good technically, but actually what is my practical application experience? So I think that kind of helped me with that.
And actually, your example there is great, because it also gets back to knowing what good looks like. Like you say, you've obviously got those set principles of business now. This is the process, this is what good looks like, and you're accountable for it. So, and what I really like about what you said about your journey, and this might even be a bit controversial, but I sat on a sort of presentation of the week, and there's a panel talking about young people getting into manufacturing, young people getting just generally into business, and there was a debate around entitlement, and there was a debate around how much young people now want that visibility, that progression route. They need to know exactly where they need to get to. I think documented, black and white, tangible as much as you can do. And I'm on board with that, because I see it and I completely understand it, and we've used it here. However, the flip side of that is it's still not enough. It's not spoken about enough. People like yourself who've just got really bloody hard work, real hard work, weekends, nights, going above and beyond, doing what. And I still don't. It's almost like people are scared to say that now, because people burn out, and this, which is a thing as well. But people, you get out what you put into this world, and I still think it's almost people are scared to talk about it now.
Yeah, I think so, and I think because you're doing it for yourself, really.
Yeah.
So okay, it's nice to be, and actually, if I'd been given that role, that wouldn't have been the right thing for me, because it would have led me in a different path, and it wouldn't have, fulfilled me as much as my career has done. But yeah, I think it does come down to some hard graft. but then I think it's great you can have that confidence when you're here because you know it there and you know it there and you know it there. So it's really good to kind of have that kind of progressive career actually. And yeah, it does take a bit of hard graft, but that's okay if you're doing it for yourself because that's ultimately what you're doing it for. Well, then why not?
100%. There's no doubt about it. Manufacturing and engineering, unfortunately, still dominated in a male-dominated environment, and particular board level. I think really it's almost not as visible that as the shop floor, but it's the stats are quite scary. Have you felt any resistance as your journey up in terms of being a female leader? What do you say?
Not it's kind of it's different really. It's difficult to sort of assess. I mean, in our organization, we have recently sort of we have had I have had female peers, and again that's something that we've looked to make sure that we have a diverse and inclusive space that we can all be in. I think along the way, most definitely, because I'm a certain maturity, so I've certainly seen the changes actually, and I'm glad now that things are much more open and progressive actually, because I don't think any woman in the workforce would kind of it's not reasonable for them to accept what was the modus operandus from yesteryear actually. So it's good to be like that. So yeah, it has been a bit like that. I mean, even when I joined this organization, we didn't have females on the factory floor, and I'm really pleased that we do now actually. And actually that moment when that happened, it created a little bit of sort of natural extra energy actually, that there was some natural competition, and the women on the work on the factory floor, they give as good as they get, and they're good, they produce good stuff, and they're absolutely valuable members of the team, and they should be, because they can deliver just as much and sometimes more. Because I always think about that Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers bit. Okay, not really for the factory floor, but Fred Astaire was very much applauded for his dancing capabilities, and Ginger Rogers, his partner, her famous line was, "Everything he does, I do backwards and in high heels." So I kind of think that that's a bit of an analogy. I know, a bit of a dated one, but about women in the workforce. Often you feel like you have to do that little bit more. You have to be that little bit extra resilient to manage that. I never expect any special treatment. I don't want any. I think we should just all acknowledge each other as humans. So let's just expect that courtesy and that inclusiveness. But I don't expect anybody to do anything separate or different from me being a woman in the workplace. So just want a fair playing field like everybody.
Completely agree. Is that something that Janus proactively look to try and improve was it mandate to try and improve their ratio of men to women? Because a lot of manufacturers are doing that right now, and it's hard.
Yeah, I think, I mean, so we had a moment where we go, why do we not have any women on the factory floor? And then made a conscious choice to make sure that that's something that we did. Somebody wanted to apply for the role, we will see who they are and let them come. So yes, for that. I mean, in administration, we have, a good proportion of female staff. I think in the office, we're about 50-50. So on the leadership team, the longest serving members of the leadership team, it's myself and two male colleagues, but it hasn't always been that dynamic. And at the moment, we're expanding our leadership team, and it's a bit more representative with women in that collective. So I'm pleased about that. It is a different dimension. I think you just bring different things. I mean, as humans, we think differently, but I think it's good to have a mix of all things, really.
So you think that the catalyst there was the acknowledgement that there aren't enough, and then from that there was a conversation and just be more open and diverse in terms of how you recruited, I guess. Was that a big part of it?
Yeah, I mean that was definitely something then, and I'm really glad that we did that. So it's not that we thought, it's a big. I don't think we thought we needed to do it for the numbers or what we present externally. I think we just felt like that's weird. Why have we not got women in this space? And now that we do, we're very glad that we have those ladies amongst us contributing that way. As I said, in the office, we're probably 50-50, but factory floor definitely still not. But there's absolutely space for anybody. The best candidates for the role is who we're after.
Absolutely. I think a lot of companies can learn a lot from Janus. Obviously, I've had Craig on the podcast. I've got a little bit amount of time for him. I think tremendous leader. They have grown at an exponential rate. They went through just crazy times of growth, which is amazing to see. Not always easy, obviously, lots of challenges. What's that been like working in that environment, would you say, and seeing that growth and being obviously a massive integral part of it?
Well, it's been amazing, actually. And when the business that I was in before was way bigger. It was about 250 million turnover. And when I came to Janus, as was Steel Storage when I joined it, there was sort of 10 to 12 million. And it's funny, when I went for the interview, I walked up to the industrial estate that it was from my London Bridge view of the Thames office. And somehow it just felt completely right. And I thought, I really feel that I can bring something here. And really have enjoyed it. But like the pieces that you've changed and developed and encouraged colleagues to do stuff, and what we have now is really can see a momentous change in how we do things. I always thought we were a big little company and had that kind of ambition back then. And since then, we've done acquisitions, mergers, and all kinds of sort of corporate rearranging, whilst also are being owned by a US parent company that's floated on the New York Stock Exchange. So we've had to do an amazing amount of diligence for that process, an amazing amount of diligence when we've evaluated companies that we've wanted to buy. So it has been an ever-changing kaleidoscope all around me. I never thought that I would stay as long as I have, but because it has been ever-changing and evolving and growing, as I said, it's just we've never had a business as usual year. Actually, it's always been increasing, growing, changing, and that's been fantastic. Actually, so built on a bedrock of good foundations of systems and processes. Always comes down to that. You've got to be able to, have sort of robustness in your systems, because otherwise growing is very difficult when you're sort of busting out all over. So that's been amazing, actually. I've when you look back, and we're just opening a new production area internationally in Poland, and that's not to detract from what we have in the UK. We are a UK manufacturer and proud to be, and there's enough market here to serve. But it's very exciting, actually. And when we go and cut the ribbon on that manufacturing plant, I think I will just take a moment to go, we've come from small beginnings to this. So from 10 to 12 million to 70 million, and hopefully next year being towards 90 million. So,
apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast.
That's the journey that I've been on. So, and with a lot of colleagues, obviously being that solid foundation. So,
yeah, I love that, and it's been amazing to see. You mentioned those solid foundations. Can you pinpoint what those solid foundations are? Would you say, for a company perhaps who has struggled to grow when they would like to?
I think back a while now, when we had that global financial crisis, we thought our industry, obviously storage, is quite resilient, because how storage is used, people use it when they're upsizing, when they're downsizing, and doing all that kind of thing. And the evolution of that has changed a bit, because people run businesses from their storage facility. So we are not an operator. We deal with the capital end of those projects. And I think for us, so we felt that the industry proved itself as resilient across those kind of challenges, those global challenges. And I think when we had those tough times, we just sort of hunkered down and took a look at our processes, actually, and thought, well, hang on, can we streamline this? Can we make it better? What's the customer experience? How can we address that? And really, if we think about kind of operational excellence, which is something that we strive for, everything that the customer expects, there's an internal piece to support that. So we really try to frame everything they need by something that we do to sort of match that piece off. So I think at times when it's been tough like that, and it was tough at COVID, when at the beginning of the COVID times, like we need to be on site delivering stuff and installing stuff, and people producing stuff on the factory floor. So it was tough, and we thought, goodness, like everybody, how is this going to go? And I can remember phoning the bank and saying, I don't know whether we're going to need a loan, but let's think about that. Can we just see where we are? We've got a good covenant with you. But as it turned out, we sort of weathered those storms, and didn't make anybody redundant. So we supported everybody during those, in the times in the best way that we could, and came out of both those places, with renewed vigor. Just to, people were hungry for us to get back on site, which was quite a challenge, because in the UK there was some set of rules, and in Europe there was a different set if you went here, or a different set if you went there. So it was quite tricky to just sort of get back into the spaces that we needed to be. So yeah, I think it's just time to sort of reflect a little. I think when times are tough like that, it's reflect a bit just to see what you're doing that you think you could do better. So that's the kind of robustness. And I think whilst nobody's going to be delighted about an improved process, they're just the intangibles that make the success of an organisation. As I said, nobody's going to go, great, that was knockout that you took those 3 steps out of that. But actually it does make a difference. And that shows up in some of our customer satisfaction piece. So I guess it's something. It always comes down to fairly simple things, really. There's no big measure. It's just the little things or the iterations that make that good.
Well, even measuring customer satisfaction, the little things that a lot of companies might not see the value in it, but that's for most businesses integral part of improving, to know what they're doing right and wrong. More importantly.
Yeah, I mean that is a key performance measure for us as an organisation. We want to make sure that we're getting 10s on our 1 to 10 scale of return, and anything that could be challenging amongst that in a low score, we would consider a complaint, and we would want to follow up on that accordingly, because we want people. A lot of what we do is about return business, and we have a lot of return business. So yeah, we absolutely do value that, and I guess that comes back to that cycle of just sort of self-reflection and that ongoing cycle, really. But yeah, no, that's a big thing for us, just to make sure we're doing what our customers need from us and doing it the best way that we can. So that's what we work for.
When you're moving from when you're at a business that where 10, 50 million turnover up to 70, 80 million turnover, purchased by a US, loads of big change at the top. Suddenly you could argue a more corporate type company overnight to some extent. Yeah. How do you navigate through that culturally as a business? Because whenever there's change, there's a little bit of fear, particularly on the shop floor. However, is that something you need to navigate that message down to the staff? What do you say?
Yeah, and that's true. And it's sometimes, I don't think anybody could claim a complete win at that the whole time, because it's just difficult. Because some people will prefer working for a small company where you did know everybody, you had your own mug in the kitchen and things like that. There is that piece inevitably, and when you do grow, people enjoy the success of it growing for a while, and then they go, whoa, it's all changing a bit. I think some of that is just about, I think, as you touched on there, Mark, just about communicating the journey. So we have weekly town halls with our whole organisation, periodic with Australia, because obviously the timing is a little challenging otherwise. So every Monday we all talk about what we're doing, individually as teams and things like that. And because we have just had this 5-year strategy planning piece, we just had a little playback with everybody about what that is. We have a company day where we get the whole organisation all together, factory floor and office staff together, because we are all together. And then we'll really take some time to walk through what our plans are, so that people can see it, and feel it and feel part of it. So I think a lot of it is dealt with by communication, but inevitably you have to put in some processes around stuff. Some people like that because they don't necessarily want hand-me-down instruction year by year by year, which gets completely changed. The 8th person that hears it, it's not going to be the same as it was intended. So some of that kind of formalisation of processes is something that is essential, but actually also is quite helpful for people, just to go, I can see the steps I'm supposed to follow.
But I guess that's that transparency communication piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
You make decisions, it's justifying why they're made and how it affects them. positively or negatively at some stage. Even when you're looking at, a new site in Poland, it's massive. Probably might not feel that big to a big company to some extent because you've got other sites. But how do you decide where to put a new factory? Because I imagine there's a lot of, owners or senior leaders want to expand abroad, or wherever that will be. I imagine that is an absolute minefield going, the logistics of it, the price of it. That must be quite a complex thing to go through.
Yeah, it is complex, and you evaluate, what's there in the location. So for us, transport is a big thing because what we do, we send it around on trucks. So we need to make sure that we've got a well-connected location. In terms of getting, committing to a space that's big, but not too big. So you might go, well, I can fill that much, but I've got to kind of future-proof it. So you almost have to just take a little bit of a risk in thinking about, well, let's think double what we feel today. And that's almost a bit of how it was with the office space that we took here in Twickenham as one of the locations, as well as having Peterlee in the northeast, is we were, let's take that. That's about the size we need. And very quickly, we needed more. So we've taken the whole building now. So I think when we looked at Poland, we certainly took a space that we thought we can grow into, because that's what we need to do. Whilst obviously maintaining, the factory at Peterlee, of course, that's a busy space for us and always will be. So,
yeah. Yes.
But yes, it is hard. And actually, working internationally, so we're in Poland. There's a lot of form filling. We'll all be used to the form filling in our own regions, but goodness, there's a lot of bureaucracy in some of the European spaces that just work slightly differently, and it's just really getting your head around all of that. So,
and for you now, Rachel, you've had a superb career. What is motivating you now? Would you say, but versus on day one, has that changed over time? Are you still very much the same sort of person? What were your thoughts?
Well, I think probably when I started, it was, I wanted to sort of influence things and make things better of a certain scale. So I think the scale of my influence was obviously much smaller. Now the scale of my influence is broader. So it's still that motivation of trying to make things better, really, collaborating with new colleagues as we grow. Are we picking the right team for going forward? So yeah, I still feel very motivated, actually. Our journey, we're just really getting to that point where we could just sort of tip into, being, a much larger organization, which is our plan. So, we've taken, we've hit all the bumps in the road getting to here. And I feel now that we can start to really leverage what we've done and really sort of expand it, perhaps a bit more of a broader rate, actually. So yeah, that still motivates me. As I said, I don't, if what I did, or if any of my days were dull, I would be looking, somewhere else. But my days are never dull. There are always lots to do. So yeah, that keeps me in the saddle.
You mentioned that future growth, which is, aggressive growth based on where you are now. Manufacturing there's had its challenges for the last 3-4 years, but it still does. What do you see as the biggest challenges, what do you say now, whether that's relevant to Janus or just manufacturing as a whole within the industry that you can see?
Well, we need to make sure that the innovation is rewarded, and, things that we invest in. We've invested in some huge machinery that we put into our Peterlee plant that really does stuff. So we really want to just make sure that we get government incentives to do things like that, to make those investments. And if we're doing research and development, that there's some motivation for that financially. And I think it's really just keeping the skilled workforce, really, because yes, you can put robots in and do this and that, but, people make a business happen. So we need to just make sure that we've got, accessibility to good quality people who care about what they do and have got a curiosity about making it better. And I think that's a lot of it. I mean, certainly when I do interviews, you kind of take, the CV tells you about their technical competency or their operational competency, depending on what role you're going for. But it's really their attitude of mind that sells them as a person. Because you can't necessarily teach that. So if people have got a natural curiosity to try and make things better and get involved, then really that's the ticket to ride for me.
You mentioned the automation piece there. I know Janus have heavily invested. It's a fascinating factory, and the evolution, for the last sort of 5 years. Some companies, it's difficult. They have maybe internal battles to justify the cost of of a robot or a piece of kit which is going to potentially save them money down the line. How challenging is that as your role, I guess, where you've got a crate coming, you're saying, right, I need this piece of kit, so it's going to cost me £100,000, whatever it will be. How difficult is that to justify? Because I guess you'll see things differently.
Yeah, but you have to do the kind of the sums on it. And being an accountant doesn't mean to make you a mathematician. It's about interpretation. A lot of what being an accountant is, and obviously just judging value in lots of different ways. Inevitably, when you're asking for some cash, you've got to see potentially how quickly that investment would save you money to actually pay for itself. You've got to work out. I guess you've just got to work out what it's going to do for the business. Will it increase capacity? Will it just solve a problem, or all kinds of things? So I think for me, if we obviously run the numbers on it just to sort of see those pieces, and then just sort of judge it in a bit more of a sort of holistic sense. But for me, I feel okay with that. We have a very big US parent company, and we've made choices that we've been able to afford. And when we've done an investment in, particularly in Peter Lee, amongst our $1 billion Janus company, we had the second biggest investment in a piece of machinery that we put into the Northeast. So, I mean, that's quite a proud claim, actually, for what we've done. But yes, always have to run the numbers, but then it's just looking at it holistically, just to make sure. A lot of investment is about removing the sort of limiting factors of what's constraining your business from growing. So, that's some of what you look at too. But yeah, I found good support for what and how we invest, and I expect to continue to do so.
Right, I've brought back an old tradition where the old guests, which I've stolen from another podcast, obviously, the old guests ask the current guest a question. So this question was actually from Claire Walton, who is she's a leadership coach. Basically, she consults business. She's tremendous, really good. So I knew she'd have a hard-hitting question. So this is hers. What is the greatest mistake you've ever made as a leader, and what have you learned from it?
Wow.
I know. Interview question right at you.
I think, okay, so particularly as a leader, I think there was an instance when I tried to evaluate a scenario and try to put myself in how somebody else would think about it. So I made a mistake because I wasn't authentic in how I judged and assessed how I would go forward with that scenario and suggest a solution to it. So I wasn't being authentically me, and it showed up as not being authentically me, and it wasn't a good solution. And I think so lesson learned with that is just trust your own judgment, because that's probably the best way to go. You might suggest something that isn't necessarily always the accepted way to go forward, but always be yourself in terms of thinking about how you'll evaluate it. So that was probably it.
Love it. Good, great answer. You've got the job.
Nice.
Quick fire questions. Who's the best manager you've ever had, and why?
I think it was just as my sort of like tipping into finance. So it's whilst I hadn't got a finance job and I was starting to study, and obviously that was where I wanted to go. He helped me just sort of believe that I could do it, because I think I was coming from a place of not having that kind of technical qualification that I needed to move on up. And he was just so laid back about it. And he didn't make it feel like a big thing. He just said, well, yeah, if you feel like you want to do it, do it. And it just felt like the barrier suddenly just dropped away and I could just step over it, as opposed to feel what it could have felt like, which is, it's really different. Finance is really hard. I don't know that I can go there. And he just took the barrier and just squashed it to the floor, and then I could just step in. And I think it was just his open-mindedness and his candidness about, I guess I worked with him, so he knew what I was like and things like that. And I really appreciated just how laid back he was, actually, just to make that an easy choice for me, and one of the best choices that I've made.
Nice. biggest influence from either business, entertainment, sporting world, anyone that comes to mind that influences you or motivates you?
Oh,
Inspire.
now that's
Word.
that's a tricky one actually. I tend to kind of not really sort of focus on individuals actually. I know that sounds a bit weird because I've got a bit of a sort of feeling about that I feel that it isn't individuals that necessarily make a mark on a business. I mean, of course, people do. Like, think about Steve Jobs and Apple. Of course, he did. But then I think I've also worked for a company where the CEO, a former company, the CEO was very strong in his own perception of his value. And when asked the question about what was the DNA of the company, he felt entitled to say that. And I thought a DNA is a very organic thing that comes from the organization. I don't think one person can say, I'm telling you what it is, so now all go and feel it, because it is a very visceral thing felt by many. I know the message and the culture comes from a smaller group. So I always kind of resist kind of sort of really featuring that actually. I just sort of, what inspires me is people that have got, like just a really casual, open mind about stuff. And really can be very inclusive in how they talk about and discuss things. I really value that quality in people actually. So it's more just a kind of like persona than naturally a kind of, an individual or a sports team or something like that actually.
Yeah, I like that view because I think the best leaders facilitate brilliance. It's not about them; it's how they bring the best out of others. So it links in with that, I would say, definitely.
Yeah, it really does, and you know what? And you can tell when somebody is really positive and very sort of well intentioned to the whole kind of process is when they do give space for somebody to be what they can and should be. So I really do value that, and when I see that happening, I really enjoy it, and I take my hat off to people that can do that as well as some people that I've worked with can. So,
3 words, things that make up a good leader. First things that come to your mind.
Inclusiveness. I would say, well, I've said inclusiveness. I mean, I really do feel collaboration. You cannot get there on your own, so you do have to collaborate with people. And well, just a word, influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think probably. So they're all kind of around that theme, but it just goes to show that, well, for me, I feel like you just can't get there on your own. You've got to go with people, and that journey has to be by many, not, maybe created by few, but followed by many.
Yeah, like that. Finally, any books, audio books or podcasts, anything you've listened to or read that you'd recommend?
A book I so enjoy, and I need to reread it. My favourite book is Birdsong, which is a novel, and I love that so much so that it kind of weeping on the tube, which is a bit sad. But the book I really, really loved was a book. I can't remember his surname. I think it was Ferguson, but it's called American Caesars, and it's about 10 presidents. So starting with Roosevelt, and it's just going through. So it tells a little bit about them personally, how they were elected, and their kind of how they were in office. And it's amazing just going back in that time because they're people, some of them from very humble beginnings, and just their influence. And actually, as the book goes on and we come to more latter day presidents, some of the kind of less than positive ways of getting into the office that they ended up having. So there's definitely a sort of flavour of a little bit of underhandedness in some of that. So I did find that absolutely fascinating, but because being that person with that influence, I mean, you want them to be superhuman. And it's amazing just to sort of see the real life facts about some of those guys. But that was an amazing book. I really enjoyed it. Well worth a reread for myself. Yeah. Note to self.
I'll have a look at that. It's a great recommendation. Look, Rachel, I've really enjoyed this. It's been great. And I think for me is that you nailed it 2 minutes ago when you talked about 3 things important for a leader, collaboration, because it's obvious for me to see, despite your such an important role in the business and the influence you have on people, and you see the importance of that. And I think everyone who is in any form of leadership role needs to understand the importance of the influence they have, but also how important collaborating is. That it's not just someone, if you're in a senior role, doesn't mean you tell people below you what you do. It's that collaboration. And I think you can see that in Janus's values. Everyone I speak to there, they all have that. And that obviously trickles down from the top, that, in order to grow and progress, you need to collaborate and listen and be authentic in all things you've talked about. So, I think you've lived and breathed the values of the company today, which has been great to see. So, look, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
That's all right. I've enjoyed it, Mark. Thank you.